a blood tie, the promise. Genesis 12, 1 through 3 says, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. The history of Abraham and Sarah begins when God called Abram. That was his name before God changed it to Abraham. But he called him to leave his home and to go to the land of Canaan. He was called out of his homeland and given great promises concerning where he was going, his prosperity and his descendants. Abraham and Sarah were looking to have children, but they found that they could not, as Sarah was barren. Abraham and Sarah were looking for an heir to fulfill a promise from God. They understood that the promised child was to be their child, but time passed and they were growing old and desperate. Getting impatient, as we sometimes do, Sarah insisted that Abraham lay with her handmaid, Hagar. They produced an heir. A son is Ishmael, but Ishmael was not the promised son. So Abraham and Sarah had to wait longer still for the promised son. In Genesis 17 and 19 says, And God said, Sarah thy wife shall bear thee a son indeed, and thou shalt call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. Isaac's birth came about from a miracle. Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 years old when Isaac was born. Thank God we are not having children at that age in this present time. Not saying that God can't do it, because he can do anything. But it won't hurt my feelings if he does ask me. Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah as a result of the promise of the covenant. The divine mandate to Abraham to sacrifice Isaac was the supreme test that God demonstrated Abraham's reverence as well as his trust in the divine faithfulness to the promise of the covenant. He prepared Isaac to be offered with the certainty that God would raise him from the death itself. God intervened in time and provided a lamb to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. This is a dramatic prefiguration of the offering God would have to give through his only begotten son, so that he would die in our place. God's covenant of love gave a son to Abraham and Sarah, and the covenant of love provided a substitute sacrifice to save that son. Centuries later, the covenant love would make God hand over his own son as a blood sacrifice for the sons of man. Isaac was the promised child, and his birth was the result of the covenant. But God included that woman, Sarah, in his covenant promises because she was the woman that gave birth to that promised child. All right.